I'm Dave Trull, and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today, we're building a new lumber rack. If you've been around the channel a while, you might have heard me talk about how the shop I'm in right now is temporary. And because of that, I've been putting off building some of the stuff that could wait until the move, whenever that'll be. One of the things I've been putting off is a lumber rack. I have a lumber rack of sorts, but it's not very useful. Every time I want to get a piece of stock, I have to move a pile of lumber, grab the piece I'm looking for, and then put all the stuff back on the rack. To make matters worse, I recently had a visitor. A raccoon had got into the shop, and when he saw me, he kind of freaked out, ran across the lumber rack, and caused an epic avalanche of lumber. It's time to upgrade the lumber rack. I'd recently seen a video by Brad over at Fix This Build That, and he had also just built a lumber rack. Rather than reinvent the wheel, I ordered a set of his plans, and we're going to go ahead and build that lumber rack today. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I will add links to both his video and his website in case you want to build this rack for yourself. And with that, let's put this lumber rack together and see how it goes. I started by breaking down some 2x4s at the miter saw for the base of the rack. 2 at 72 inches and 4 at 19.5. Next, I got out my pocket hole jig and drilled 2 pocket holes on both ends of the short pieces. I laid out the stock on a flat surface, clamped the outside pieces together, and joined them together with 2.5-inch pocket hole screws. I used a 19-inch spacer board to ensure the interior dividers landed in the correct location and stayed square. Then I used the same pocket hole screws to secure them in place. Time to break down a sheet of 3/4-inch plywood. I used an 8-foot straight edge. I cut the base of the rack to width, or 26.5 inches. Using a shorter piece of aluminum, I cut the base width length of 72 inches. After setting the plywood on the 2x4 frame, I pre-drilled and fastened it in place with 1.25-inch wood screws. I started on the corner to ensure that everything sat square and the edge of the plywood matched the edge of the frame. Then I went back and added the extra screws to hold the unit together. I'd marked the center lines of each 2x4 in the plywood to ensure that the screws would hold firm in the stock and, so it would look symmetrical. To start the frame upright, I began by cutting 2x4s in 4-foot sections. When all 8 were cut, I changed the saw to a 5-degree angle and set a stop block and cut one end of each piece. I reset the stop block and cut the same angle on the other end, leaving the pieces at 47.1/8 inches long. Back at the pocket hole jig, I drilled 2 holes on the bottom face of each piece, making sure that the holes were on the outside or long edge of the angled upright. With that done, it was back to the miter saw to crosscut 4 each of the 4 frame connectors. These also have a 5-degree angle on each end. Once you have the first angle cut, set a stop block to the appropriate length and flip your stock to get the matching angles. Then it's just a matter of adjusting the stop block for the correct length of each of the 4 sizes. I used a sliding T-bevel to mark the angle when setting a new size, just to help dial in the length of the cut. I marked the locations of each frame connector on one upright, then used that to transfer the marks to the other 7 uprights. Make sure that these registration lines are on the inside face and the pocket holes are at the bottom and facing down. I flipped them all over and marked the center line of those locations, and marked those on all 8 uprights. This line marks the location for the screws, so I didn't have to guess on their locations when assembling them later. And yes, just to keep things neat, I marked a center point for each screw by setting my square at 3/4 of an inch and marking each center line from each side. I can't have my screws all willy-nilly. I pre-drilled the screw holes in the uprights before assembling with a taper bit and a countersink. Again, it's easier now when I can lay them flat as opposed to doing it while they were all laying on their sides. This will all make sense in a minute. The uprights are sitting up above the work table just so I don't drill into it. Time to begin the assembly. I started with one set of uprights and a set of frame connectors. I laid them on their sides using the table to keep things in line, then held each frame connector in place along the lines I previously drew on the inside of the uprights. Again, I pre-drilled through the pilot holes I had just drilled in the uprights into the connectors, and then fastened the pieces together with some 2.5-inch screws. Once all 4 connectors are fastened in place, I flipped the unit up and drilled and screwed the opposite upright in place. Again, checking to make sure that the connectors were lined up with the layout lines inside the uprights. Then I repeated the same process for the other 3 upright assemblies. Oh yeah, just make sure that you use one frame connector of each length, smallest to largest, to create the A-frame you're after. Before mounting the upright A-frames on the base, you want to add your casters. I use 6 3-inch heavy-duty full-locking casters and mark the locations in the 4 corners and 2 centered on the outside 2x4 rails. I was using 5/16 by 1.5-inch lag screws, and I pre-drilled the holes for each lag with a 13/64-inch drill bit. I used a bit of tape on my bit to show me how deep to drill so it wouldn't penetrate the top surface of the rack. With that done, I came back with my driver and a socket and fastened each caster in place. I tried to keep them just short of tight so as not to strip out the holes. Once they were all in place, I went back with a ratchet and tightened them down all by hand. I just had to give the base a quick once-over with my random orbit sander. It got rid of any of the pencil marks, the bits left over from drilling and screwing, and I knocked off any sharp edges. I know it may just be a lumber rack, but it can look good too. With the base cleaned up, it was time to add the upright assemblies. I started on one end, kept the uprights flush to the outer edge, and centered it on the platform. When I was happy with the location, I fastened it in place with more 2.5-inch pocket hole screws. Using the same 19-inch spacer board I used earlier, I set the second upright in place, centered it on the platform, and fastened it down as well. Finally, I repeated the process, starting with the opposite end and the inner upright. In hindsight, using a wider spacer board would have worked better in both situations, but this is what I had kicking around. I cut the next piece of 3/4-inch plywood to length at 72 inches, then took it over to my table saw and ripped one edge at 5 degrees. Then I could rip 8 strips down to 1 11/16 with 5-degree angles on either edge. This is where it helps to have a great set of plans, so you can double check to make sure you're cutting the bevels correctly. It took me a minute or two to get the angles correct in my head. It would have been even longer if I didn't have these plans. It also helps if you don't have everything on one circuit breaker. I made sure to shut off my saw before resetting the breaker. I also went in and shut off the extra AC unit that was pushing my amps over the top. While I was at the table saw, I also cut the 2 toe cleats, which have square edges, and those are cut at 2 3/4 inches wide. The top support strips are even with the top of the upright assemblies and flush to the ends. Just make sure you have the angles facing the right way before you pre-drill the mounting holes. I fasten them in place with just 1 1/4" screw at each upright. The other 3 sets of support strips need to be mounted flush to the top of the frame connectors and flush to the edge. To do that, I just built a jig that I could clamp to the frame connectors, then butt the support strips to the bottom of the jig. Then I just made sure I had the angle correct, pre-drilled, and fastened each one in place. The toe cleats were fastened in place so that I had 1-inch lip sticking up above the base, and that'll just keep the sheet goods from sliding off later. I started with a full sheet of 1/4-inch plywood and cut down the 9 shelves to size. Apparently, a day of filming in 90+ degree temperatures can take its toll on equipment, and my camera had a meltdown during those cuts. Once I had them cut, I laid out the notches to go around the upright assemblies, and then I taped the matching shelves together so I could cut multiple shelves at one time. Once again, good plans make preparing the shelves a breeze. The only shelves that didn't just drop right in are the ones where I thought the plans were off. They weren't. After recutting the 2 shelves to the correct size, they dropped in and I could fasten all the shelves in place with some 1-inch brads. The top shelf was simple as it was just the width and length of the rack. One last addition is the vertical storage rack. I cut 2 pieces of 3/4-inch plywood to 23 3/8 by 7 inches and then I got out my fancy taper cutting jig and cut 5-degree angles on one edge. If you need a taper jig like this, I'll add a link to Fisher's shop where I get the plans for mine. I did add an adjustable stop to mine for repeatable cuts like I had here. With the side pieces cut, it was back to the pocket hole jig. Plan ahead, unlike I did, and you won't have to recut any holes. The pocket holes go on the inside of the uprights and should line up with the first and second support strips, as well as 2 pocket holes to go into the base. I drilled 3 holes in the side and only one of them was in the correct location. Oops. Back at the table saw, I cut 2 horizontal rack support strips. I also ripped the stock for the rack dividers while I was here. Over at the miter saw, I cross-cut the horizontal support strips to 26 inches and then set the saw to 5 degrees again. I cut the divider pieces at 5 degrees, leaving them a bit long. Then I set the saw back to 90 degrees and cut each piece to its final length. In hindsight, these didn't match the plans quite as well and I should have crept up on the final length during assembly, but they still worked. Back to the assembly. I placed the right side upright flush to the right side of the rack and screwed it in place with 1 1/4" pocket hole screws. 2 in the base and 1 in each support strip. I set the left side upright in place as a spacer and held the top horizontal support strip in place. I pre-drilled and screwed it in place with 2 1 1/4" screws. I could then screw the horizontal strip to the left upright, and then using the second horizontal strip as a spacer, I fastened the left side upright to the rack. After installing the second horizontal strip to both left and right sides, I could remove the top strip to fasten the top of the left side upright to the rack. After reinstalling the top strip, I marked the center point of the horizontal strips to accept the rack dividers. After marking locations for 2 screws on both strips, I pre-drilled them with my taper bit with a countersink on it. I held the top divider in place, pre-drilled that, and held it in place with more 1 1/4" screws. I repeated this process for the lowest strip. Well, almost. I realized I wouldn't be able to fasten the bottom strip in place unless I did that first. So I pre-drilled that and fastened it in place, making sure that the 1-inch height of the divider matched the 1-inch height of the toe cleats. With that in place, I could add the middle divider. And while this step may not be necessary, I took the time to pre-drill and fasten the dividers from the back as well. It requires slightly longer screws, but the extra holding power made me feel better. With the rack complete, there was nothing to do but sort through all my stock and try to put it in a logical sequence and see how long it would stay neat. The new lumber rack has been in the shop for a couple weeks now, and it's great. It's easy to put things away and find things, and I can still get to the wall-mounted rack because the new rack is on wheels and I can just roll it out of the way. I'd love to hear what you think about this video. Is there something I could have done better, smarter, easier? Drop in the comments below. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and maybe share it with your friends. If you haven't already, maybe hit that subscribe button and the little bell so you get notified every time I put a new video out. And for now, have a great day. Stay safe. Take care. See you soon. The new lumber rack has been in the shop for a couple weeks now, and it's killer. And if you haven't already, maybe hit that subscribe button. Really?